My family mocked my work and called everything I did bugs. When my $2 million success made them jealous, they tried to sabotage my farm. What they didn't know was the bugs I raised were actually bald-faced hornets. You know that feeling when your own blood tries to sabotage your dreams? Well, I got to watch mine get stung by 1,000 angry hornets, and honestly, it was incredibly satisfying. For years, I felt like the family's invisible shadow, especially when my sister, Lucy, was around. I mean, here I am, an entomologist, doing vital work with insects, and for them, it's just bugs. It was never clearer than that one night, sitting at my parents' cramped dining table. Lucy, all bright-eyed and buzzing, was detailing her grand European tour: Paris, Rome, Barcelona. $3,000, she chirped, worth the investment. My throat tightened, a familiar knot of anger and disbelief. Worth the investment? Just 3 days before, she was sobbing on the phone about a $2,000 credit card debt, begging me, to bail her out just one more time. And I, like an idiot, did what I always did. Transferred the money. No questions asked. 10 years, a decade, of this endless cycle. I was the fixer, the silent provider, only to sit there, completely invisible, while she planned her next extravagant escape. The dining room, already small, felt like it was shrinking under the weight of Lucy's infectious, almost suffocating excitement. Mom's eyes were practically sparkling, hanging on every single detail of the itinerary, while Dad just chuckled, that fond, indulgent shake of the head he only ever saved for his golden child. I tried to speak, to nudge my way into their charm circle. "I'm also working on an exciting project," I began, my voice feeling small even to me. "A bioagricultural system that uses beneficial insects too." Mom cut me off, not unkindly, but with that patient, slightly condescending look she used when you're talking about imaginary friends. "Still busy with those bugs, dear?" she asked, a faint smile playing on her lips. Dad just laughed, reaching for more chicken. "Maybe you'll find something useful someday, Kinsley." That familiar ache, like a stone, settled deep in my chest. I wasn't just busy with bugs. I was documenting pest control methods that could literally revolutionize sustainable farming. But to them, I might as well have been collecting bottle caps. Lucy launched into another story about her boyfriend, Rick, and I faded back into the faded wallpaper, exactly where I always seemed to belong. But not that day. That day, I needed something from them. And the weight of that need was a physical thing, churning in my stomach. "I'm thinking about Grandma's old farm," I blurted out during a rare lull in Lucy's monologue. "It would be perfect for my project. Grandma always said it would be mine someday." The mood shifted instantly, like someone had cranked down the thermostat. Dad's fork paused, midair, halfway to his mouth. Mom's smile, once so soft, hardened, becoming calculating. "That property is in my name, sweetheart," Dad said, his voice taking on this cold, businesslike tone I'd never heard him use with Lucy. She never changed the paperwork. A flash of memory, sharp and vivid, hit me, Grandma's weathered hands, pointing out a tiny parasitic wasp in her garden. "Nature knows how to protect herself, Kinsley," she'd whispered, her eyes twinkling. "The strong don't survive by being cruel. They survive by being smart." "But she promised," I whispered, the words barely audible. Mom's laugh cut through the air, sharp and brittle, like breaking glass. "Promises and legal documents are two different things, honey." The next week felt like swimming through mud. My best friend, Charlotte, who's had a head for numbers since college, listened to my story over coffee, her sharp financial mind already processing. "Bring them a purchase agreement," she suggested, her eyes glinting. $1. Make it official. They couldn't argue with legal paperwork, she reasoned. But they could, and they did, laugh at it. Mom actually scoffed when she saw the document. $1? Really, Kinsley? Dad's eyes met hers across the table, and I saw that silent communication, the kind that comes from 30 years of marriage and shared priorities that clearly did not include me. "Well then," Dad finally said, a shrug of indifference. $20,000. That's a family price. $20,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. After bailing out Lucy, Owen, my incredible partner and botanist, and I had exactly $16,300 in our joint savings. Money we'd painstakingly saved as collateral for a business loan to get greenhouse equipment. I only have 16, I managed to say, my voice catching. Dad just shrugged again, that casual cruelty coming so naturally to him. Then I guess that's not enough. I stumbled outside onto their small porch, my hands shaking as I dialed Charlotte's number. The November air bit through my thin sweater, but I barely felt it. They want 20,000, I told her, my voice raw. But I only have 16. And I can't call the cops, I have no legal standing. Charlotte's voice, usually so calm, turned hard in a way that made me so incredibly grateful she was on my side. He's stealing the farm your grandmother wanted you to have, she said, cutting through my self-pity. But she didn't make a will, I choked out, the unfairness burning. My dad's her only child, and he hated that farm. Maybe she thought no one would fight me for it. Listen to me, Charlotte said, and I could hear her moving around, probably already pulling up her banking app. I'm sending you the full 20,000. Use your 16,000 to start building. This isn't a gift, Kinsley. It's seed money. I'm your first partner. I trust you, even if your family doesn't. The next morning, I stood in my parents' kitchen with a cashier's check for $20,000. Dad examined it like it was a forgery. Mom hovered behind him, her face a mixture of surprise and something that might have been grudging respect. Well, Dad said, sliding the deed across their scratched kitchen table, I guess that's that. I signed my name next to theirs, my hand steadier than it had been in weeks. The farm that raised my grandmother, that she walked with me through when I was small and curious about every crawling thing, was finally mine. But as I slipped the deed into my old leather briefcase, I realized something fundamental had shifted. The desperate need for their approval that had driven me there, that had pushed me to swallow so much, felt different now. Quieter. Like it had been replaced by something else entirely. Something that felt dangerously like determination. The next 18 months felt like punishment for wanting something this badly. Owen and I stood in the middle of what used to be Grandma's farm, our $16,300 burning through our fingers like water through a broken dam. The morning sun, instead of being a comfort, just highlighted the sheer scale of the disaster we'd bought. Cracked irrigation pipes snaked through weeds that reached my waist. The old barn leaned so far to the left, I was honestly surprised it was still standing. Water pump first? Owen asked, his botanist's mind already cataloging the impossible. Without irrigation, nothing else matters. We found a used pump for $800. Installation materials ate another $300. Fence repairs swallowed $600 more. By the end of the first month, we'd spent nearly $2,000 just to make the place functional enough to even start working. I learned what 16-hour days actually felt like. My hands blistered from digging irrigation trenches. Owen's back seized up twice from hauling pipe. We took turns collapsing into bed at night, too exhausted to do anything but stare at the ceiling and wonder what in God's name we'd gotten ourselves into. The water table wasn't where the old map said it would be. We dug 3 test wells before we found reliable water. Each failed attempt cost us $500 we didn't have. The fence collapsed during a storm in February, and we spent a weekend in freezing rain rebuilding it ourselves because we couldn't afford to hire anyone. By March, our joint savings account had $437 left. This is insane, Owen said, standing knee-deep in mud after yet another irrigation pipe burst. His research background had prepared him for controlled laboratory environments, not this daily chaos of broken equipment and unpredictable weather. We're hemorrhaging money for a system that might not even work. I wanted to argue with him, to inject some hope, but the numbers didn't lie. We'd burned through most of our savings, and we weren't even close to having a functioning bioagricultural system. The beneficial insects I planned to introduce wouldn't survive in soil this depleted. The water filtration system existed only on paper because we couldn't afford the materials to build it. That night, I stared at my phone for 20 minutes before finally calling home. Mom, it's Kinsley. Oh, honey, her voice brightened with surprised pleasure. How's your little project going? The words little project hit like a slap, but I swallowed my pride. Actually, I was hoping to talk to you and Dad about a short-term loan, just to get through the startup phase. Silence stretched across the line. When Mom spoke again, her tone had shifted to something colder, sharper. A loan? Kinsley, we already sold you that property, at a very generous family price, I might add. I know, but… Honestly, sweetheart, this whole farming experiment seems a bit impractical. Maybe it's time to consider something more realistic. The conversation ended 5 minutes later with polite excuses about tight budgets and obligations. I sat on our front porch afterward, watching the sunset over acres of half-finished irrigation ditches, feeling smaller than I did sitting at their dinner table. 2 days later, Lucy posted on Instagram a photo of herself in designer boots, standing in a field somewhere, arms spread wide. The caption read, "Living my best farm girl life." Authentic. Back to basics. Blessed. The comments piled up underneath, heart emojis from her friends. Ah, so cute. You should totally start a farming blog. Owen found me staring at my phone, my hands shaking with a rage so potent it surprised me. "She's mocking me," I whispered, my voice trembling. He looked at the post, his jaw tightening. "She's mocking us. Our work. Everything we're trying to build here. But what choice did we have? We couldn't stop now. We'd invested everything." The breakthrough, the real turning point, came in May when Charlotte drove out to see our progress. I almost canceled her visit because I was so embarrassed by how little we had to show for 18 months of backbreaking work. The irrigation system functioned, but barely. The soil improvement trials showed promise, but nothing concrete yet. "This is incredible," she said, standing next to our test plots, where we'd been experimenting with beneficial insect populations. "It's a mess," I corrected her, feeling the familiar sting of inadequacy. "We're months behind schedule and almost out of money." Charlotte crouched down and examined the soil composition data I'd been tracking. Her financial mind processed the numbers so differently from my discouraged scientist brain. "Look at your pest reduction rates," she said, pointing to my charts. 60% decrease in harmful insects without any chemical intervention. The water filtration metrics are outstanding. And this soil analysis shows remarkable improvement in just 18 months. I hadn't seen it that way. I'd been so focused on what wasn't working that I completely missed what was. "You're not failing," Charlotte continued, standing up and brushing soil from her hands. "You're building something revolutionary, but you need more capital to finish it properly. We can't afford." "I can." She pulled out her phone and started making notes. "This isn't charity, Kinsley. This is investment. Real investment. I want to be your partner, not just your lender." The money arrived in our account the next week. $15,000. With a partnership agreement that made Charlotte a 20% owner of whatever we built here. For the first time in months, Owen smiled when he woke up in the morning. We hired proper equipment for the soil conditioning. We installed the water filtration system I designed but couldn't afford to build. The beneficial insect introduction program finally got the resources it needed to succeed. 3 months later, I stood with Owen and Charlotte in the center of what had become a functioning bioagricultural ecosystem. The morning air hummed with the sound of healthy insect activity. Our test crops grew in neat rows, protected by nature's own pest control system. "Look at this," I said, leading them to the edge of our property where a massive oak tree provided natural shade for the water filtration station. Attached to the far side of the trunk, completely hidden from casual view, hung a large, papery gray nest the size of a basketball. "Bald-faced hornets," I explained, my voice filled with respect rather than fear. "They're incredibly territorial, but they're also natural predators of the insects that would destroy our crops. They're like having security guards who work for free." Charlotte stared at the nest with fascination. "They just showed up?" "Nature fills the niches that support it," Owen said, his scientific excitement matching mine. "The ecosystem Kinsley designed attracted exactly the kind of beneficial species we need." I watched the hornets coming and going from their nest, each one focused on its job of protecting this small corner of the world they'd claimed as their own. Something about their purposeful determination resonated deeply with me. "They're guards," I said quietly. "Natural predators who know exactly what they're protecting." The patent approval letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, official and thick in my hands. I read it 3 times before Owen's whoop of joy from across our tiny kitchen finally made it real. "We did it," he shouted. The bioagricultural system that uses beneficial insects for pest control was officially ours. Kinsley Harper, Charlotte Mason, and Owen Harper, I read aloud, savoring each syllable. Joint patent holders. Charlotte squealed when I called her, the sound so unlike her usual composed financial analyst persona that I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "We need to file incorporation papers immediately," she said, her voice crackling with energy. "I already have lawyers standing by." Within a week, Harper Mason Agricultural Solutions existed on paper and in reality. Charlotte handled the legal framework while Owen and I focused on documenting our methods. The farm hummed with activity. Bees danced between flowering plants in our pollinator strips. The bald-faced hornet nest, which started small last spring, now spanned 3 feet of the old oak tree's trunk. "Nature's own security system," I told Owen. He laughed, but I'd watched those hornets patrol our borders with the dedication of trained guards. The call from Terra Genesis Corporation came on a Friday afternoon while I was testing soil samples near the irrigation channels. Owen's voice carried across the field, urgent and breathless. "Kinsley. Phone." Dr. Sarah Martinez from Terra Genesis spoke with the crisp authority of someone accustomed to making million-dollar decisions before lunch. "Miss Harper, we've been following your work through agricultural journals and patent filings. We'd like to schedule a site visit next week. Are you available?" "Available?" I almost laughed. We'd been working 16-hour days for 2 years, and now Terra Genesis wanted to see our little operation. Of course, I managed. They arrived with an entourage, Dr. Martinez, 2 engineers, and a woman with sharp eyes who introduced herself as Director of Strategic Partnerships. They spent 4 hours examining every irrigation line, every beneficial insect habitat, every data point we'd collected. The director kept asking questions about scalability and replication potential. "The Hornet integration is particularly impressive," Dr. Martinez said, watching our guardians patrol their territory. "Natural pest deterrent with 0 chemical inputs. Brilliant." 3 days later, the offer came through Charlotte's law firm. Terra Genesis wanted to license our system for nationwide implementation. The numbers made my hands shake. $2 million up front, plus royalties on every installation. "We're millionaires," Charlotte whispered when she called. "Kinsley, we're actually millionaires." The local newspaper ran the story first. Local entomologist strikes gold with bug-based farming. Then the agricultural trade magazines picked it up. By Thursday, a reporter from the state paper drove out to interview us. Owen grinned so wide during the photo session that I worried his face might stick that way. The call from Mom came that evening while Owen and I sat on our porch, still processing the whirlwind week. Her voice sounded different. Bright. Animated in a way I hadn't heard directed at me since, ever. "Kinsley. Honey," she gushed. "We saw the newspaper article. Your father and I are so proud. So proud." The words tumbled out like she was reading from a script she'd been rehearsing. "That's my daughter, the famous scientist." Mrs. Henderson from next door couldn't believe it. "Our little Kinsley. A millionaire. Our little Kinsley." The phrase sat wrong in my chest, like food that wouldn't digest properly. Where was this pride when I needed it? When I begged them to let me have Grandma's farm? "Thank you, Mom." My voice sounded flat even to my own ears. "We should celebrate. Family dinner this Sunday. I'll make your favorite pot roast." Pot roast wasn't my favorite. It was Lucy's. But I didn't correct her. "That sounds nice," I said. After I hung up, Owen studied my face in the golden afternoon light. "You don't look happy about your parents' call." "They want to celebrate now," I said, a bitter edge to my voice. "Where were they when we were eating ramen for 6 months straight?" He reached for my hand, his fingers warm and steady. "People change, Kins. Maybe the success helped them see what you've been building." I wanted to believe him. Part of me had waited 31 years to hear pride in my mother's voice. But another part, the scientist in me, recognized a pattern when data points aligned. Public success equals sudden parental attention. The correlation felt too clean to be coincidence. Lucy's Instagram post appeared 2 hours later. A screenshot of the newspaper article with the caption, "So proud of my brilliant sister. Family first. Hashtag success. Hashtag sisterlove." Heart emojis and celebration confetti filled the comments from friends who'd heard her mock my bug hobby at family gatherings. The cognitive dissonance made my teeth ache. Sunday dinner felt like performance theater. Mom had set the table with her good china, the set reserved for Christmas and Easter. Dad asked detailed questions about agricultural markets and profit margins with the intense focus of someone who suddenly discovered oil in his backyard. Lucy hung on every word about Terra Genesis Corporation, her eyes bright with calculated interest. $2 million, Dad repeated, whistling low. Plus royalties. That's real money, Kinsley. Real money, as opposed to the fake money I'd been living on while building this system from nothing. The partnership ceremony is next week, Owen explained. Terra Genesis wants media coverage. Agricultural Innovation Showcase. Media coverage. Mom clapped her hands together. My daughter on television. Lucy leaned forward, her smile sharp as winter air. You'll have to be careful now, Kinsley. Success makes people jealous, makes them want to tear down what you've built. The words hit differently coming from her, like a warning wrapped in concern, but with something else underneath. Something that made the hair on my arm stand up. After dinner, while Owen helped Dad with coffee, Lucy cornered me in the kitchen. Her voice dropped to that conspiratorial whisper she'd used since we were children. You know, Rick has been asking about your farm setup. He's really interested in sustainable agriculture suddenly. She laughed, but it sounded forced. All these years of mocking my sister's bug obsession, and now he wants to know everything about beneficial insects. That's great, I said, though warning bells rang in my head. He even bought some agricultural magazines. And fertilizer. Says he wants to start composting. Her eyes glittered with something I couldn't identify. Isn't that sweet? My boyfriend, suddenly so environmentally conscious. The drive home felt longer than usual. Owen chattered about Dad's questions and Mom's obvious pride, but I kept thinking about Lucy's words. Success makes people jealous, makes them want to tear down what you've built. Monday morning brought a call from Miss Mercy, the incredibly competent 50-year-old farm manager we'd hired last month to handle daily operations while Owen and I traveled to partnership meetings. Her voice carried its usual calm professionalism. Good morning, Kinsley. Water quality tests are perfect again this week. The beneficial insect populations are thriving. Everything's running exactly as designed. Thank you, Miss Mercy. We couldn't do this without you. It's my pleasure. This system you've created, it's revolutionary. Nature protecting herself while feeding people. Your grandmother would be so proud. Her words wrapped around me like a warm blanket. Strange how someone I'd known for a month understood what this farm meant better than the family I'd known my whole life. Tuesday evening, Mom called again. The invitation sounded casual, but I detected something underneath. A fishing expedition disguised as family concern. Lucy wondered if you and Owen might come for dinner Saturday. Nothing fancy, just family. She's so interested in your work now. I'm sorry, Mom. Owen and I have an important meeting at Charlotte's office Saturday afternoon. Partnership details to finalize before the ceremony. Oh, a pause. Well, when will you be back? Probably not until late evening. Charlotte's office is 20 minutes away, but these meetings run long. Of course, dear. Business first. Maybe after the dinner? Somewhere nice? A 5-star restaurant. The suggestion hung between us, and I realized what I was hearing. Not maternal pride, but economic opportunity. My success had value to them now, but only the kind that could be converted to dinners and bragging rights. Maybe, I said, which wasn't a yes, but wasn't a no. After I hung up, I walked outside to check on the farm in the gathering twilight. The hornet nest gleamed silver gray in the last light. A few guards patrolled the perimeter, their wings catching moonbeams as they circuited their territory. Grandma's words echoed in my memory. Nature knows how to protect herself. The strong don't survive by being cruel. They survive by being smart. I wondered if hornets ever had to learn the difference between family and threat, or if they're born knowing that protection sometimes requires boundaries. The thought followed me into sleep, along with the image of Lucy's glittering eyes and her casual mention of Rick's sudden interest in fertilizer. Owen and I were 20 minutes away at Charlotte's office, reviewing partnership contracts for the Terra Genesis Corp signing, and Miss Mercy was handling the Saturday shift alone. Miss Mercy, bless her heart, didn't know about my family's toxic history. She saw Lucy's bright smile and heard her explanation about wanting to show young people aspiring to get into agriculture around the farm, and her kind heart opened immediately. "Of course, honey," Miss Mercy said, wiping her hands on her work apron. "Your sister has built something remarkable here. I'd be happy to give you the full tour." Lucy played her part perfectly, the devoted sister, proud of her family's success. She asked Miss Mercy detailed questions about the water filtration system, keeping her occupied at the front of the property while Rick and his friends drifted toward the back like shadows. "This is fascinating," Lucy gushed, pointing at the main control panel. "How exactly does the mineral balance work, and what about seasonal variations in water quality?" Miss Mercy launched into an explanation that could take 20 minutes. She was passionate about the work, grateful to have someone who seemed genuinely interested, but Lucy's eyes kept darting over Miss Mercy's shoulder, tracking her boyfriend's progress. At the back of the farm, Rick grinned at his two buddies. "Let's make this place filthy," he ordered, his voice carrying the cruel excitement of someone who's never built anything worth protecting. They pulled chemical bottles from their backpacks, motor oil, harsh fertilizers, anything that would contaminate the delicate ecosystem we'd spent 2 years perfecting. Jake, one of Rick's friends, spotted a head-high tree at the property's edge. From where he stood, it looked perfectly normal and dense, just another piece of the landscape. He scoffed and unzipped his pants. "I'll water this one first," he announced, his voice full of juvenile swagger. But he didn't stop there. After finishing his business, he pulled a small hatchet from his backpack, the kind weekend warriors carry to feel dangerous. "A few chops for fun." He raised the hatchet and swung hard into the trunk. What Jake didn't know, what he couldn't see from his angle, was that on the exact opposite side of that tree, completely hidden from his view, hung the massive gray nest of our bald-faced hornets. The impact of his hatchet reverberated through the trunk like a drum, and suddenly the air exploded with fury. "Get him off me!" Jake's scream pierced the afternoon quiet, high and panicked and desperate. The hornets poured out of their nest in a black cloud of rage, and Jake was running, stumbling, his arms windmilling as he tried to brush away insects that had no intention of being brushed away. Rick and his other friend froze for exactly 2 seconds before Jake's terror reached them. He was running straight toward them, covered in angry hornets, and the insect's defense system read this exactly as it was designed to, an invasion by multiple threats. The hornets expanded their attack. Rick threw his backpack and ran for his life, the plastic chemical bottles banging around inside, but, thankfully, still sealed. His friend dropped to the ground and rolled, which only made the hornets angrier. The air filled with the sound of men screaming, boots pounding dirt, and the high whine of insects that had shifted into pure defense mode. Back at the front of the farm, Miss Mercy's explanation about mineral filtration systems cut off mid-sentence. Those weren't screams of excitement or play. She'd worked around men long enough to recognize panic when she heard it. "Stay in here," she ordered, grabbing Lucy by the arm and pulling her toward the nearby tool shed. Lucy's face had gone chalk white, all pretense abandoned as her carefully planned sabotage collapsed into chaos. Miss Mercy pushed her inside the small building. She was already pulling out her phone, her fingers steady as she dialed my number first, then the police. 30 years of farm life had taught her to handle emergencies without falling apart. My phone buzzed during a break in the contract discussion. Charlotte and Owen looked up from the partnership documents as I answered. "Kinsley?" Miss Mercy's voice was calm but urgent. "You need to get back here. Your sister brought some boys to the farm and something's gone very wrong. They're being attacked by the hornets." My blood turned cold. The hornets only attack when their nest is directly threatened. These men did something to provoke them, and given Lucy's recent behavior, I knew this wasn't coincidence. "Are you safe?" I asked, already grabbing my keys. I'm fine. I locked your sister in the tool shed and called the police. The boys are getting stung pretty badly. But they're alive. They're running toward the road now. Owen and Charlotte were already moving, gathering papers and heading for the door. Charlotte's face showed the same grim understanding I felt. This wasn't random vandalism. This was family warfare, and someone just escalated it beyond anything I imagined. The 20-minute drive back to the farm felt eternal. Owen gripped the door handle as I took corners faster than I should, while Charlotte called ahead to make sure emergency services knew where to find us. My mind raced through possibilities, each one worse than the last. When we arrived, 3 police cars and an ambulance created a light show in our usually peaceful farm entrance. Rick, Jake, and the third man sat in the back of the ambulance, their faces and arms covered in angry red welts. Jake's right hand was swollen to twice its normal size, and Rick kept touching his neck where darker marks clustered like a necklace of fury. Miss Mercy met us at the gate, her face grim but relieved. They didn't get to do whatever they came here to do, she reported. Jake hit the hornet tree with a hatchet, and that was the end of their plan. I walked quickly through the back section of the farm, checking water quality sensors and examining the scattered backpacks the men dropped in their panic. Chemical bottles rolled in the dirt, caps still sealed, contents unspilled. The Hornets saved everything we've built. Officer Martinez, a woman I'd met at community meetings, approached with a clipboard. Miss Harper, we need to know if you want to press charges. Looks like they came here with intent to damage your property. I looked across the yard where Lucy sat on the ambulance bumper, no longer locked in the shed but clearly shaken. Her face showed a mixture of guilt and defiance that I recognized from childhood, caught in the act but still hoping to talk her way out of consequences. For 31 years, I've protected her from the results of her choices, paid her debts, made excuses, enabled her sense that actions don't have real consequences. No, I said finally, the word feeling like a revelation. There's no actual damage. But I want a restraining order. Officer Martinez nodded approvingly. Smart choice. Sometimes the legal boundary is more effective than criminal charges. Lucy's eyes widened as she realized what I'd said. She opened her mouth to protest, to explain, to manipulate, but I was already walking away. The woman who once desperately craved her family's approval had learned something important from the Hornets. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is defend what matters, even if it stings. Miss Mercy hurried over, her face creased with concern. I should have known something was wrong. She kept asking such detailed questions about our water systems, keeping me distracted while the men disappeared. This isn't your fault, I told her, putting a hand on her arm. You had no reason to suspect my own sister would. I stopped, unable to finish the sentence. Let me check the damage, Owen said, heading toward the back of the property. I followed him, dreading what we might find. The chemical fertilizers and motor oil could have poisoned our water filtration system. Months of work destroyed. The Terra Genesis partnership ceremony was supposed to happen next week, if the farm wasn't functioning. But as we rounded the corner near the disturbed hornet nest, Owen stopped and grinned. Look. The tree Jake attacked showed fresh axe marks in its trunk, but the bottles of chemicals lay scattered and unopened where the saboteurs dropped them in their panic. Not a single cap was removed. Not one drop of poison touched our systems. The Hornets stopped them before they could do anything, I whispered, feeling something like awe. The nest itself hung undamaged on the far side of the tree, its gray surface gleaming in the late afternoon sun. A few guards circled lazily, but they ignored us completely. We weren't a threat to their territory. Your grandmother was right, Owen said softly. Nature does know how to protect herself. Back at the parking area, the ambulance had departed with its cargo of stung saboteurs. Sergeant Martinez handed me a business card with information about filing the restraining order paperwork. Through the shed window, I could see Lucy slumped on the bucket again, her phone pressed to her ear. Calling Mom. Probably. Or Dad. For once, I didn't care what she told them. For once, their disappointment in me felt like someone else's problem. 3 days later, I stood in the courthouse holding a signed restraining order. Lucy had to stay at least 500 feet away from me, Owen, and our property for the next 2 years. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s, had read the police report with obvious disgust. Family disputes are always difficult, she told me after signing the order, but what your sister did crossed every line. You're making the right choice. The following week, the Terra Genesis Corp partnership ceremony proceeded without a single hitch. The executives, after hearing about our farm's self-protecting ecosystem, were even more impressed than before. They saw the Hornet attack as proof that our bioagricultural model can literally defend itself against interference. Revolutionary, the lead executive kept saying. Nature as its own security system. I smiled and accepted their congratulations, but inside I was thinking about something else entirely. For the first time in my life, I protected something that mattered to me. I drew a line and held it, even when it hurt. Even when it meant choosing my own peace over family obligation. 6 months have passed since the Terra Genesis partnership ceremony, and I barely recognize my life anymore. The kitchen window where I used to stare longingly at Grandma's abandoned fields now frames rolling green expanses dotted with white research tents. Owen and I have become traveling consultants, flying from Ohio to Oregon to help other farmers implement our bioagricultural model. Millionaires, Charlotte said last week, showing me our latest financial reports with a grin that could power the entire farm. Officially, legally, undeniably millionaires. The word still feels foreign in my mouth. Growing up, $1 million seemed as distant as Mars. Now our system is being replicated in 12 states, with expansion proposals coming in faster than Miss Mercy can file them. This morning, Owen and I sit on our rebuilt front porch, watching the sunrise paint our fields in shades of gold and amber. The Hornets have rebuilt their nest in the same oak tree where Jake's foolish hatchet swing changed everything. The papery gray structure hangs like a protective lantern, 20 feet higher than before. Nature adapts, I murmur, taking a sip of coffee that tastes better than any lobster dinner ever could. Owen's hand finds mine, warm and calloused from 2 years of building something that matters. We've just returned from a site visit to a struggling wheat farm in Kansas, where our beneficial insect population reduced pesticide use by 80% in just 4 months. The farmers' children can play in fields that don't smell like chemicals anymore. The phone rings from inside the house. Owen squeezes my hand and heads in to answer it, probably another consultation request. Our partnership with Terra Genesis opened doors I never knew existed. Agricultural universities want me to lecture. Environmental groups seek our endorsement. Foreign governments inquire about licensing our methods. But the voice that drifts through the open window makes my blood run cold. Kinsley, honey, we are so proud of you. The family hasn't gotten together in so long. Owen appears in the doorway, phone extended, his expression carefully neutral. Mom's voice continues its sickeningly sweet melody through the speaker. Why don't you come over for dinner this weekend? I'll buy lobster. That's your favorite, right? I take the phone with steady hands. These were the words I waited 31 years to hear. The invitation. The pride. The assumption that lobster is still my favorite food, as if she spent decades cataloging my preferences instead of ignoring them. Through the window, I can see the hornet nest swaying gently in the morning breeze. The insects inside are peaceful now, content in their fortress they built without asking anyone's permission. No, Mom, I say softly. I'm busy. Silence stretches across the line like a held breath. In the background, I can hear Dad's television and what sounds like Lucy crying about something. More drama, more crisis, more need for someone else to fix what they've broken. Busy? Mom's voice shifts, losing its honey coating. But we're family, Kinsley. This is important. I know, I say, still watching the hornet's nest. But I'm busy. There's sputtering on the other end, the sound of someone unaccustomed to hearing the word no from me. Probably the first time in 3 decades. I feel Owen's presence behind me, solid and supportive, representing the family I chose rather than the one that chose to overlook me. We'll call you later then, Mom says, her voice turning sharp with the promise of future manipulation attempts. You can try, I say, and hang up. The silence that follows isn't empty. It's full of chirping insects, rustling leaves, and the distant hum of agricultural equipment tending to crops that will feed families without poisoning the soil their children play in. Owen settles back into his chair beside me, not asking questions, not demanding explanations. He understands that some victories require nothing more than a witness. I lean back and close my eyes, feeling something settle in my chest that I've never experienced before. Not the familiar ache of rejection. Not the desperate hunger for approval that drove 31 years of invisible sacrifice. Freedom. The Hornets rebuilt their nest higher and stronger than before, protected by experience and strengthened by survival. Just like me. When I open my eyes, the sun has risen fully over our fields, illuminating an ecosystem that protects itself through balance rather than aggression. The entomologist who once craved her family's approval had finally built something that couldn't be torn down by their indifference, something that was entirely, completely, beautifully mine.